feasting are the best rules in Pendragon, bar none, and they will test every part of your character's traits and passions and skills in a way that even battle does not. Every time I run a feast, my players get excited. They love it so much. And I just wanted to share quickly the prep I do and just how the rules roll out and a little bit of how Foundry supports that, but not a lot. Okay, so you can see I've got my Foundry screen up. We'll deal with that in a second. Okay, so when I'm thinking about a feast, the first thing I like to do, obviously, is how big is the feast going to be? And look, there are rules about that on page 42 of the Game Master's Handbook, which is where you will find all the feasting rules. You can't find them anywhere else. Go and buy it. It's really good and necessary for running Pendragon, and if anyone's telling you otherwise, they're lying. So you can have a small feast, which might only have 2 rounds of events going on, or you can have a very large feast like Arthur's Pentecost feast, which will have 5. The second thing I like to do is work out who's going to be there, who's who in the zoo, who's chairing, hosting the feast, who are the major players who are turning up, who are the minor players that the characters are already engaged in some way with, either through combat or violence or treaty or love, however it might be, like who might be there that they can meet. Because when I play those event cards that we're going to talk about in a second, I like to have actual NPCs I can draw upon to talk about who are there or who might become important NPCs through those event cards. The third thing I like to do is work out, are there any secrets, are there any romances, any intrigue, any alliances that I'm going to be playing through or hinting at through the feast that the characters can get involved in. And of course, as is always the case with Arthurian legend, and particularly with Mallory, I need to leave the door open to a maiden on a horse riding through the feast and shouting, "Who will rid me of this troublesome knight?" or "Who will take this sword from me and possibly kill their brother with it?" I need to work out all of those things. The next thing is, what are the players' own agendas? What are they thinking about? What are they trying to do? Have a knight who's really trying desperately to become a romantic knight and meet that test. So what are the opportunities for them to impress their lady love or even find one if they don't already have one? Like thinking through those things. And then finally, on page 43 of the Game Master's Handbook, there's a really good table of random foodstuffs that the characters could be eating, and to sort of add color and particularly once again to influence when we get to event cards, which I'll talk about in a second again. I like to pre-roll those and have them ready to go so I'm not rolling in the middle of the feast. Now, I personally put all of that in OneNote because I run all of my games online, but you are obviously completely welcome to write that in hand notes or to put it in whatever manner you see fit to record it. But I like to have all of that stuff worked out in advance. Okay, so when we get to starting the feast itself, the first thing we actually have to do is calculate the character's starting geniality. And geniality is really important. It's a bonus to any skill, any courtly skills that they're going to use through the feast, and it adds to the end when we calculate how much glory they acquired by attending the feast itself. So quite important. Starting for most knights who are just jobbing knights will be they have ordinary clothes for the court, so they will get a +1 to their geniality. Really wealthy knights can go well north of that, even up to +5. But that's usually where it starts. And it'll add most commonly also to appeal, which is how I'm going to calculate that glory at the end. The second thing I'm going to do is calculate where they're sitting. And for that, Foundry, the guys who've been writing the module for Pendragon, have done a great job of creating a kind of feasting encounter. So if you go to the encounter tab, and you don't have to do this, but I'm going to change this to feast. And these are the 4 things that you roll against for seating. And you do that in the rules, and you do that face-to-face as well as online. So you can be seated above the salt, which is at the high table. You can sit closer to the salt, which is just below the high table, not quite touching the people. You can be further from the salt, which is where most jobbing knights will end up. And then you can be on the floor if you fumble. The way we work out where we are in regards to that is we make what are called glory rolls. So the nice thing is in the Foundry instance, these guys have very helpfully created this interface so I can just add them to the encounter, and then when I click on this roll initiative, what it's actually rolling is that glory roll, which is my glory divided by 1,000. So I rolled a 1 against my total of 2 because Aura of Lambor, who is Brandon's knight, has 2,042 glory, and that means he had a 2 in 20 chance of pulling that off. He got closer to the salt. Drusilla failed with the 17, so they end up further from the salt. And then finally, Arianrod also failed and ended up further from the salt. Now, if you fumble, you can end up on the floor, and if you roll a critical, you end up above the salt. If you end up above the salt, by the way, you get +2 to your geniality per round, and that matters for a whole stack of obvious reasons. One of the biggies is obviously adding to that glory, but also that bonus to skill checks. So then what we do is, now that we know where we're seated, we might not want to stay there. Now, knights who don't want to stay there have to make modesty rolls and or proud rolls, depending on which way they want to move, to see if they're willing to move. Knights who are on the floor, for instance, might want to be seated at the table, and so therefore need to make a proud roll, and then they need to make a courtesy roll. I think they have to crit it to get up, but, good luck to them. All right. So once we've done that, we now know where we're seated, and now we're up to just working through events. What we can do is one of two things. So we can choose to do something which is not based on a feasting card. So that is either flirting, gaming, rolling intrigue, rolling indulgent. So that's eating lots of food, drinking lots of wine, ferreting out secrets, playing games of chance or not so much chance, and finding that romantic opportunity. If I do that and I just roll a success, I get a tick against that skill and we can narrate something. If I crit it, I get my appeal in glory, and I obviously get a tick on the skill as well. Now, knights who come to a feast and are actively seeking to ferret out a secret might prefer to do this to trusting the feasting cards, because they can definitively say, I'm using my intrigue skill, that's what I'm going to do. If they don't do that, then they can have so much fun. So first of all, we've got our feasting deck, and I'm just going to reset it because I was doing this a second ago to test it out. So I'm using Complete Card Management, the module, just for awareness. So some of the things I'm doing, you can't just do with the base out of the box. The other thing is all of these cards are built, like the built from scratch, because there isn't currently, the Game Master's Guide is not currently available in Foundry, so you've got to do it yourself. All right, so the first thing we do is we're going to deal out cards. Now, we work out how many cards we might be able to deal out to a character based on a particular calculation. So the way we do that is we take their appeal plus their current geniality, and note I did use the word current geniality because as events are played out, their geniality can go up, and obviously if they're sitting at the highest table, they're getting an additional +2 to the +1 we gave Drusilla before. So if she was sitting at the high table, she's currently got +3. And then we also take on board an additional bonus based on their glory status. So in the case of Drusilla, and I'll just close this for 1 second so we can go back to her. She's an unproven knight, so she gets +1 for her glory. She's got that +1 for her geniality from the clothing, and she's got an appeal of 14, which gives her a total of 16. And when we go to the table on page 42, what we can see is that means she can draw up to 3 events around, and up to is an important point. So the way it works mechanically is I pass her a single card. So I go in here, I deal a single card to Drusilla's hand, which gets dropped in, and now Drusilla has a card. So if I double click on her, she got Fairy Tales. Now, she can do this up to 3 times. But first of all, let's have a look at what this card is and the construction of it. So we've got the title of the card up the top. We've got the test that we're going to be undertaking directly below it. And then we've got a little bit of narrative text sort of saying, several ladies ask you to tell them something about the fairy. And this is where you can take advantage of that role-playing opportunity, right? So perhaps there's an important lady and you want to bring them to the fore. So you might extend that to be Countess Ellen comes and asks you to tell them something about fairies. Now, because it's unopposed folklore, then I determine what happens. So obviously if I fail or fumble, nothing happens. If I succeed, I get a +1 to geniality and I tell them some entertaining stories. If I get a critical success, I get a +2 to geniality and a tick on my folklore. And in addition to all of that, at the bottom of the card, I've got this big red circle with a +1, which is a geniality I get just for having the card and being involved in the event. So if we go to Drusilla now and we roll her folklore, which we will do, folklore. Yep, there we are. She's going to roll, and she's got a bonus. No, folklore is not a courtly skill, so we won't be taking any bonuses from our geniality. We just roll a 16, so we don't get a success. So in that case, I'm going to pass that card to her played cards because she's going to hold on to it. Okay, and that's actually the first round done. So we've played that card. Drusilla has had that first card done. Now, if I go back to my feast deck, I'm going to deal her another card because we're in the second round. It's just going to be a short feast. We deal her the second card. It's now in her hand. So we go to that Inflamed Passions. All right, so decision, prudent versus reckless, and I choose which of the two I want to roll against. Am I going to roll against prudent or am I going to roll against reckless? And you can see here what the outcomes are. If I get a critical success, I'll get that +2 to geniality. If I get a prudent just success, I'll get +1. If I get a reckless critical success, I get -2. If I get a reckless, I roll both and I start with prudent, and then reckless success, I get -1 to geniality. Now, I'm going to not play that card because it sounds dangerous, so I can choose to put it into the discard pile, and then I can play, as the GM, I will pass them another card. So now they're up to their second card for this round, and note they've got up to 3 that they can draw upon, right? So it'll have appeared, those bandits. Unopposed hunting, a local knight mentions having trouble with bandits, critical success, there's a description, success, there's description, there's +1. Now, weirdly, I'm not going to play that one either. So we're going to place that there and it's gone. Now for the third and final one, right? It's because I can get up to 3 cards and I can either play or discard one, and then I play or discard one, and then in this case, I must play this card no matter what it says because I'm at my maximum. So insult to a serving girl. All right, so decision, just or arbitrary. A knight slaps a serving girl. You see others turn away in embarrassment. I'm going to roll Drusilla's just because that's the sort of person Drusilla is. So if I go to their just, it's 10 and 10. Actually, it turns out they're not much of anything. But I'll roll their just, and in this case, we get a success, which means we get the outcome of the success. So you intervened, your cup and trencher now runneth over, gain +5 to indulgent until the end of the feast, +2 geniality, and I will hold on to that as well. All right, so now I've moved both of them into Drusilla's played cards, and you can see here that I can see both of them. So if I pop them up, I've got we failed that one, so I've just got the +1 for geniality for that. And then for this one, there was no big number, but I did succeed here, so I've got +2, so I've got a total of +3 to my geniality. And to calculate how much glory I get at the end of the event, what I do is I take that +3 from the cards, I add the +1 that I started with from my clothing, so I'm now at +4, and then I get... So I got 4 geniality. Now the threshold is 5, and we'll talk about threshold in one moment. But before we do that, I'm going to calculate my score per round. So I add my appeal plus my final geniality, and in this case that's 4 plus 14, so 18, and I did 2 rounds. So I get 36 glory for just being at the feast, and then in addition to that, if I had gotten geniality of 5 or better, if I was just a little bit better, if I'd got a crit somewhere in that story that would have given me that additional maybe 1 from the fairy stories, then I would have got a bonus of 10 glory for exceeding the threshold. So my total glory would have been 46, not 36. And that's how I play through a feast. It's pretty simple and it's pretty fun, and I think it's awesome because of the role-playing opportunities and like I said at the beginning, my players love it. Next, I'm going to have a crack at talking about battles, and as I'm preparing for my first big one, and see how that goes. All right, talk to you later. Bye.